Welcome back to another episode of Soul Coffee. Today's guest is an Ambos Nogales native and Latinx innovator who has invested years upon years of understanding the local culture, and she is one of the best that I've seen and have appreciated at building relationships and really cultivating this aspect of walking with social equity, a third paradigm, third spaces, and a third culture, as she embodies service, she embodies philanthropy, she embodies what it means to just be able to help bridge people to a new way of being, as coming from Nogales, Mexico, and being American grown yet having roots in Mexico. She embodies what it means to be a Mexican American, and has really been such a light and such an example, such a representative, such a delegate, such an ambassador of potentiality and possibility. And she has been one of my good friends here in Tucson. When I first landed, she was one of the first people I met, and when I heard her first speak on that Zoom call representing the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, I was like, yo, we got to connect. I got to be able to appreciate more of her. But she focuses on building entrepreneurial communities and networks, including events, training, consulting, and research that extends beyond South Arizona. But one of the terms that she really brought awareness to for me is that she helps shape experiences for binational business opportunities with Mexico and the United States, y'all. And when I heard binational business opportunities, and being the CEO and founder of Startup Unidos, whose tagline, or one of their lines, is innovation without borders, y'all. We're going to dive in, but please bring some energy, bring some warm claps, some hugs, and all things for Stephanie Renee Bermúdez. Welcome to Soul Coffee, sis. Bienvenida.
Muchas gracias, hermanos. Thank you so much. You know, I do remember that Zoom call. You threw your pen at me, and that's when I knew it was going to be real.
Abby turned up right from the get-go, from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yo, and one thing that Steph, really embodies, and that she does so well, like, she literally took my hand and brought me into her home, brought me into her space, and showed me that the border is literally 45 minutes away from Tucson. And she showed me the literal border, which is something, I'm from Connecticut, and that's just something that was so foreign to me. And she taught me that, it wasn't, like, I think the border is just such a like, it can be very abstract for people, because unless, like, you see it, it's like, whoa. But when you see it, like, I'll never forget seeing those families like having chairs one side of the border, and then on the other side of the border was their grandparents and their family, and they're just having like lunch together. And I think the border, for me, it just represents, or is a physical representation of what people see or what people feel mentally in potentiality. And in you being such a potent bridge, sis, why is it important for people to be able to understand even just the concept of what the border can mean?
Not everybody takes the responsibility to care like you did. And not everybody takes the responsibility to show people who show an interest to care about a border experience. The border experience that I offered you is not one that's common. It's not one that you can find in Google, or that you can Airbnb experience. I took you behind the scenes. There were certain areas along the border in which we went that are not transient. They're not available for those that just drive through Nogales or through any other border community. So I did it intentionally to wrench your heart. And I did that. And it took you a while to process it, the experience, because it's so overloaded. But you experienced our tour from the perspective of an American, and then you stepped into Mexico. And that's when you probably were like, wow, there was a number one testimonial that everybody has to offer me is, I had no idea. I had no idea it was like this. Unfortunately, I've gotten feedback from some people, vulnerably, who have shared with me that they imagine the border would be not a secure area, perhaps a barbed wire fence with a lot of Border Patrol agents keeping Mexicans away from crossing the border, which is far from the reality on what you saw. But the narrative at a national level regarding the border, and even the narrative that we haven't taken the reins on regionally, to be a representation of what the borderlands are. Because although the border is complex and it is hard to process and explain, it is also a place that breeds incredible human beings. The way that we are forced to constantly change and innovate just makes us different. And I'm not the only Nogalense that you've met. So that's true. Yeah.
One thing that I think I love that word, Nogalense, like Nogi, that's another word. Nogalense. It's so good for me to appreciate because I'm Peruvian. I learned a lot of my Spanish with my Puerto Ricans, and now understanding and appreciating, the culture here. It's so important to be able to support. And one thing that I think is massive that you embody in a lot of people coming from Nogales is like, y'all really holding space for two worlds, which is huge. Like that. And I don't think a lot of people understand when you're coming from two worlds, you literally have to create a third paradigm or a new way of being that's like you say the saying, not from here, not from there.
Ni de aquí, ni de allá, neither from here or there.
And that's so powerful because if there's like I don't want to say an isolation, but like an alienation. It's like, like there's only a certain percentage of belonging until you come into that belonging of yourself. And in that discovery, what have you really learned about the human experience?
Well, I didn't know that about myself. When you're in that situation, I didn't know that. It took me leaving Nogales, which in fact, the majority of young Nogalenses leave Nogales. There's a brain drain and a talent flight in our community, and not just our community. A lot of border communities that I've investigated have similar dilemmas, with losing their young talent. I didn't know that, but when I left Nogales, one of the things that I recognized was that I was looking for other Nogalenses. Like, no matter where we went, we find each other.
Ooh.
We do. I don't know if it's like by a frequency or, like some secret intentionality, but once we discover where we're at, like we create these like third cultures, sub-communities of people like us because we think differently. I also knew that I was different when, let's just say, people who are only Mexican or can identify from other parts of Mexico that are not borderlanders were telling me that I wasn't Mexican enough. And when I stepped away from my community, I was also recognizing that I didn't align with a lot of like American pop culture because I was living in this like border bubble or border safe space. And then, I was reminded that I wasn't American enough. So we're third culture people, borderlanders. We're a little of this and a little of that. My first language was Espanol. It was Spanish. And then my prominent language became Spanglish. I was a straight up bocha, which means that I really didn't, I hadn't perfected either language, neither English or Spanish, even though Spanish was my first language. When I started kindergarten, it was all English, and I was encouraged to only speak English or to perfect my English. So we started to learn how to code switch really young for that reason, because the way that we were behaving under the age of 5 at home and the way that we needed to assimilate and learn how to re-behave come kindergarten is, a part of that identity. And it's unique. And that's why with Startup Unidos, I celebrate that. I celebrate the borderlander because we have a lot to offer. We have a lot. We're bridges. We're bridges from the here and there. We're bridges in the conversation of how we should communicate. We're vessels.
Tell me a little bit deeper, how was that integration process of needing to re-assimilate? Because you also brought light to things, and being in this space, it's been a lot to learn for me. Like getting familiar with the Mexican culture. There's a lot of shame, and some grandparents not teaching their kids, or some parents not teaching their kids Spanish or wanting them to learn English. So I think that's traumatic. How was that for you, and what have you noticed with your people?
It wasn't traumatic for me growing up because I think like in border communities, it's accepted that you're, a little chopped up, right? A little this and that, because you're being encouraged by your immigrant family, right? To take on and assimilate a new culture and a new language. It wasn't until after I left Nogales that I started being traumatized, because I started realizing from other Latinos that my language in Spanish it didn't line up with like actual Spanish, because borderlanders, we use a lot of slang, and we are also not just, both of our languages that we use are colonized languages, right? So Spanglish is like this rebel language, and I think that like slang is this rebel language, right, where we make up our own terms, and we also borrow from other influences in the region, like the nations. Like, so for example, like Yaqui, like you see a lot of border Spanish actually being Yaqui, such as the word beachy that we like to use a lot, which translates to nude, but the actual Spanish word is desnudo. But we say beachy, and that's a Yaqui word, but it's recognized as an acceptable Spanish term here in the region. Yeah.
I love the slang.
It's complicated, brother, but I love it. Ándale.
Yeah, ándale.
But you have to end it with pues.
Ándale pues.
Ándale pues.
There we go. I love it. Something that you said earlier, which I think is, I resonate with, as I'm Black and Peruvian. And even with my Black roots, like I think 2023 is going to be a big exploration. And like, where do we really come from? Like, where does my Black side really come from? As I understand, there were slaves and different things. And there's a lot of history there of like displacement of the roots. And when it comes to code switching, I hear chameleon. Like I needed to be a chameleon in order to be able to find some kind of space to integrate. And, all right, maybe I need to be a little bit more of this, or I need to be a little bit more of this, but it's been a journey to try to really understand more so of me, and how do I identify, and how do I find like just my footing and expression, because when there's the inability to be a chameleon, then that leads to just feeling alienated or isolated or just so alone or misunderstood. And, how did you find understanding of yourself at a deeper level?
Code switching is a form of like defense or survival. If we don't figure out a way to fit into prominent spaces which are white, then we don't succeed. So, and if we shape ourselves to be a little too white, well then those in our communities might not like that, because we sound more like them and not enough like the rest of us, so that's also a complicated, space to be. But for me, I learned how to code switch in as early as kindergarten, I even remember having cousins when we would visit them in Mexico, like kind of mimic how we would speak English and how we would behave as Americans. Like there is a way of using a tone or of being as an American that we learn to be. And I switch back and forth from being Mexican and using a tone and a way of being and body language and back and forth. So I am a different Stephanie in Espanol than I am in English. In fact, I'm code switching for this conversation. Because I code switch into several different shapes throughout the day, you know, according to my surroundings. So am I in a room with all people of color? Or am I in a room where I am the only person of color? You know, so the environment, I've learned, always helps me dictate how I'm going to behave, the tone I'm going to use, how I'm going to show up, if I will speak, what I can speak about. And society constantly reminds us what is acceptable and what isn't. And I push up against a lot of boundaries, a lot. I say the things that should be said, and I take the responsibility that others have difficulty taking on. And now that I'm the CEO of my own organization, where I am not needing to respond to a predecessor that is a government or a university figure and said they are my partners, I can take that responsibility without feeling like there's going to be repercussions. So, and I take the responsibility because it's a responsibility that I have as a leader. I think that if I don't do it, if I don't speak up, then who will? And if I'm being hurt at the level, having the privileges that I have, and I'm having these experiences at this level, then what can I expect of those that feel like they don't have a voice? So it's heavy, but I'm the right person for it.
Ooh. It's a lot, or it is heavy to be able to uplift people and uplift energy.
Yeah, and keep myself uplifted.
First and foremost. What do you think's been one of your biggest strategies in making sure that you are grounded or that you are uplifted before you then help then pour into a lot of eyes that, you know, are watching you, and, you know, that are one thing that you said is that, you know, in being in this space where there's a lot of eyes on you, it's like, you know, you're walking with a lot of dreams. You're carrying a lot of dreams. There's a lot of dreams. And it's a very, very delicate material, very delicate fabric for, you know, people to invest in you and put energy into you and for dreams. And, you know, what's been one of your strategies in which you navigate with that?
I haven't always done the right thing. But with every moment that I've learned, I've gotten better at it. And I take it really seriously now. And again, now with my own organization, because I am the representation, I'm pulling from everything that I've learned, from every professional development course, from every book that I've read, from every mentor that I have access to. I'm putting so many things to practice in making sure that that I don't take that lightly, that most dreams end up in the graveyard, and especially dreams that come from communities of people of color. Because if we hear from communities that have access to some services feeling like they're unsupported, then what about those that have no idea that there is support out there at all, or that they see that their idea could even be valuable enough to become something in the first place? They're looking for a friend in the process, not a procedure, an application, an event, or something other. They're looking for confidence, for trust. And I like to start there and build from that. And we get different results, but that's also why I take so much responsibility in like calling things out when they need to be said, because in reshaping or laying out like new planks and like developing a bridge, like somebody's got to say it, somebody's got to do it. And I'm crying right now because it's like hard work, but I'm imploding because it's like I'm also really excited about just like having the opportunity to keep going.
Yes.
And I'm just getting started.
Yes.
And I'm just getting started. And I'm so excited for it. And I feel so grateful. I feel so grateful for the trust. Yeah. I feel so grateful for the trust that so many of my community members have given me in allowing me to represent them and to lead in these spaces and to create new pathways for them to just unfold their ideas, but also like their identities, because we think that things need to be copy and pasted. There is this assumption that in this idea space, things need to be one way, and that like there's a certain process, there's a 1, 2, 3 to creativity, but there is so much more that needs to happen before you are appointed to the website, you know, at your local municipality that's going to support you in getting your first permit or you know, or organizing your first business. Like there's mindset work that is behind ideation and you know, fostering communities and nurturing idea making and people at the idea stage. You know, like it's something that I just absolutely love and that I'm really good at.
Yeah, you are.
I am really good at that.
Oh man. Oh, I love what you're talking on is it's the responsibility of being a trailblazer. It's like, and as you're out here blazing these trails or building these bridges, you know, you're being massively courageous in being able to just lay that plank, and even just in taking a step on that plank and making sure it's sturdy, that people can, it's like third spaces. It's like they're a space that you share with me. It's like they're neither work and they're not of home, but it's like a space to like enter. And it's like every step that you take is opportunity, or it's now a space that people can enter into to then gain their footing, so that way they can think a little bit more, they can advance a little bit quicker, they can move a little bit more, because they're like, all right, if Steph has done it, like I can do it too. Or you're even in the space with them and you're welcoming them into, so that way then they're tapping into your energy and your resources and what you call your social capital, your relationship capital, which is so massive, different from your network, because your network gives things available, and it's like your network creates the sandbox, but then how you explore deeper with people and their thoughts, their ideas, their connections, whatever it may be, well, you're taking a deeper application, or you're adding like a thought construct to the saying, where it's like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like you're inviting that so much deeper, and you invite it so much deeper through your work that you do and the consistency that you brought about for people.
Seguro. I had the fortune of developing at the time what was downtown Tucson's largest shared workspace. And right now we're at the L offices. That is, you know, the next generation of how people are working and how they connect to their work. And it's just not the same anymore. We don't need an office. And even offices post-COVID are realizing that we don't need an office. But we do need a workspace, and we do need community, and we do need each other. So I had the fortune of being taken to school when I unfolded Connect Co-working in downtown Tucson, which was at the time the largest shared workspace. And it was at a time where people were coming up and they were trying to figure out how to telecommute, how to be nomadic, how to work from home. You know, this conversation on how people are behaving with traditional spaces like this or that, home or work, is not something of today. You know, it's something that's been happening for a very long time. And the shift has been needed, but it's only getting started, right? I think that it's up to us to decide. It's up to a community to decide how they work and how they live, and what appropriate spaces are needed for themselves. So these creative spaces, these innovation spaces, these hybrid spaces, these shared spaces, they're determined by community, and community is all about like-mindedness. So there could be any type of community surrounding any one space where a person is going to feel more human in, because it aligns to the stuff that they care about. So it can't just be one shared space and, you know, one innovation space for one type of person. It's like we have to hold the reins and decide, you know, where we're comfortable in this. And it's uncomfortable to be at home all the time. And it's also uncomfortable to be at work all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, like a traditional occupation, like it's restless to have to sit there in the same space in a cube for so long. And yeah, so we gotta change it up. So third spaces, third culture. I started this this whole process thinking that being really inspired by third spaces, by innovation spaces, incubation spaces, co-working spaces. And I got to visit over 100 spaces, went to a lot of conferences in 3 different countries, got to speak about it internationally in Colombia. It was beautiful, but ultimately I realized that what I was in love with was not the space, but the result of the space, the impact of the space. I was in love with how people could feel with letting their guard down, bringing the barriers down. And I loved that I could facilitate and inspire people to be creative and to connect. So I realized that when I was developing this space that some of the magic that was unfolding in the space had nothing to do with the space itself, but instead the experiences that I was offering. The way that I was presenting the space from the initial, people were telling me that they fell in love with the space before it was even developed because of the way that I was describing it during our hard hat tour before it was ever even done. There were 100 people who had signed up before the space had even been developed. And it taught me a lot. I thought that I was going to be in co-working, but instead, deeply, I was asking for more. And I got more. I got a lot more. And now, from the experiences that I had, I am all about community. I am all about impact. I am all about la raza, the gente, the people from these borderlands. I'm about the things that ultimately matter. And I am about developing bridges into these types of spaces and supporting people at all levels, right? I am a bridge, but I'm not the only one. I'm not the only bridge. And I want to develop more people to be empowered, to let their guard down and not be afraid to have the answer and to call it like it is. Because nobody's coming to save us. We have to take on the responsibility to resolve the issues that are pressing to us and are pressed upon us. And real issues are coming, brother. Real problems are coming. We saw the situation with COVID and how that affected the border. But climate change is another real serious issue that's coming upon us, and our relationship with Mexico is critical. And I'm encouraging our communities to take on the responsibility of being the solution for what is undoubtedly going to impact us greater than anybody else. I know it sucks to hear it, but it's the truth. And nobody's coming to save us. So I'm not going to, save every starfish, but I do hear my partners in community say that they want to take on a greater responsibility in reaching the communities in which I serve. So I think collectively we can, but there needs to be a greater sense of responsibility. We just gotta call it how it is, and it's nobody is creating the types of spaces where we can just say it, where we can just be wrong, where we can just be real and raw.
From what you've observed, as this was massive, and I really just want to take a moment to just acknowledge that call forward for so many people, so many humans, as I resonate with. No one's coming to save us. And as a doctor, as a healthcare professional, I encourage my people to take it upon themselves, the responsibility of what it is to live, to be brave, to be courageous, to face themselves, to face what they've gone through, to face what they've integrated and with what they've held within them for so long, whether it be trauma in different ways, shapes, and forms, but in taking care of their health and clearing things and creating the space internally, it can empower them to venture out and just be a reflection of things, as you've done so much work externally to continue to open things up and press back about what's being pressed against you, and in creating a dynamic nature which these spaces can create. Because in community is everything. We're not supposed to do everything by ourselves. We're not supposed to heal by ourselves. We haven't gotten this far because it's been by ourselves. But in these spaces where we can do our work together, and in the space we can create a garden that's collectively being nourished, is being watered, is being built upon by so many other individuals. And I think that's beginning to break away from the traditional 9-to-5 or the old paradigm even of this is the only way or this is what needs to be done. So in your work, inviting people to come together and be able to have a space where they can co-contribute, and you giving the little ingredients and welcoming the tour of, like, building Tucson and downtown Tucson, there's an imperative golden thread that I'm seeing of trust.
For sure. And responsibility and intention. Oof. So I pride myself that we don't retrofit in the work that we do. We don't copy and paste, because if we copy and paste, we're just going to get the same results. Plus, nobody has time to do it how things have been done in a time where everybody's screaming for things to be done differently. So we don't retrofit. We take the time. We've constructed a social equity model, which essentially means that we ask people what they need, and then we trust in what they tell us that is needed, and we try that. We give them exactly that, and then perfect upon that. Too oftentimes, people from the outside have the solution for others, and they don't trust. They don't trust that they're not the right person to come in and solve, and there's trouble with listening. So responsibility is important, and I pride myself that in the work that we do is culturally anchored. We don't just translate things from English to Spanish. I celebrate everything that we are, and I celebrate the people from the region. I put them in the front of everything. Like, I'm not the type of leader that needs to have the answer. I'm always the type of leader that is looking to share and offer opportunities and create experiences for people from my community to be able to get stronger.
Yes.
To get stronger and shape themselves. So I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing because it's powerful and it's important. And not a lot of other people are doing what I'm doing or taking the responsibility in the way that I am. I walk like a nonprofit. I might appear like a nonprofit, but I am completely innovative in the way in which I am innovating on workforce development, on cross-border economic development, on small business development. I'm doing it from the private sector. So it's a conversation that I am not ready to completely unfold, but I would say that it is the most innovative approach to everything that I'm doing is that I am not a primarily white board saying that there needs to be diversity. Instead, I extracted conversations from those boards and other groups that hold responsibility or others assume should host the responsibility. And I created something exactly like they said that was needed, that was local, led by somebody that was a digital native, that was a minority, that could be on the ground. And I've supported them. We're one of the only organizations that has led government at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level in reaching people and communities in what otherwise would be completely overlooked spaces, you know? And we're doing it responsibly. Like, we're not just bringing tools that have been translated, but instead we're redesigning and recreating systems and approaches and the way that we everything. And it's our branding, it's todo. It's todo because todo. It is, it's todo. Where we are just getting started. We started this work in the Ambos Nogales area, but we are carrying it to other communities, other border communities, and we're not stopping at Arizona. We have our eyes on Southern California, on New Mexico, and also Texas, which are the 4 states in our nation that represent 50% of all Hispanics. Mm. So I'm on a mission to empower borderlanders, to just show up and be exactly what we are, and to develop spaces that they feel like that are safe, where they could just like let their guard down and trust and get access to all these tools and people. Mm. The future is bright.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You keep speaking. Go ahead, get some water. Go ahead, do whatever you need to. You pass that baton to me, sis. Oh, as you've shared just so much, as I appreciate what I think the value in what you're doing as a nonprofit organization, as a space, as a leader, is that there's this dynamic nature to things, like massively dynamic nature to things, and fucking listening. Like, you listen, social equity, you ask and you trust, what do the people need? And because there's a mutual or symbiotic trust, they can share with you very vulnerably, what is it that they need, but then you providing the space for them to step into themselves and them giving themselves permission to step into that space. That's where I think you experience so much newness. And I'm thinking, of course, when this goes to healthcare, because before you came in today, even just in pre-chat, it's a new space for a lot of Blacks and a lot of Latinx folk to step into healthcare. Like, there's a questioning of like, they don't even there's so many fucking conversations I had in grad school. Is like, there's 1% of chiropractors that are Black. I think it's now 3% are now Latinx. It's a space where we don't feel, or there can be these feelings of lack of safety, lack of trust, or that it's not meant for us because there's different aspects to not being able to receive us because we didn't have the image. I didn't have a Black doctor, let alone a Black chiropractor growing up. I didn't know that was a thing. No one said that I could be a doctor, let alone someone that can help someone else heal. And in what you're doing, I think that there's a benefit as if the system that is healthcare right now, just one, let alone the school system or the media system, what's going on, if there was more connection, if there was more trust, there's more exchange, there's more listening from quote unquote top down, or the leaders who don't even need to come from these ivory towers, but if there's people that were listening to the needs of the nurses, of the doctors, of the physicians, let alone you throw some color on this thing, and we didn't have to create all these spaces to begin with, but instead there was more of an exchange, more of a symbiosis, more of an openness, man, I can only imagine the impact that would have on healthcare. And what you're doing, sister, is you're really helping create that space and inviting people forward to take more responsibility, to be able to step into themselves. And I love that you said you're not the only bridge, which I love because that disperses the energy, that disperses the responsibility of your shoulders, and it empowers people, but they still have to step up and they still have to speak. They still have to take the opportunity to speak in a civil rights kind of way. Like I was just watching the Denzel Washington and Malcolm X, the movie that was created in 92. And, think of some of the Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King. They had to take massive steps. Of course, the spaces didn't create. If anything, there was not even the spaces weren't created. They were opposed. They were red taped. They were destroyed actively. And in the style of what you're doing, it's just so refreshing to hear because you're really, really putting good context and you're laying good bricks of what I think is a dynamic nature. And I think it's a more sustainable way of living. And I think it's going to help bridge us all throughout this decade.
For sure. And I step on mines, and I'm okay with it. Like, I've had people try to control my speech, remove words like privilege from my language because it's made them uncomfortable. Plus. So I am only getting a reflection of those who I lead are also going to experience. Like, it's not going to start or end with me. Mm-hmm. But I'm just going to keep fighting. Like, I am feeling more encouraged every day to host the types of spaces where people can cringe and where people can heal. Like, just say it. Let's just say it. Let's just release this insecurity of not being the right person to say it. Let's release this insecurity that I am directly talking to you when I say it. Let's
that's good.
Release this insecurity that you don't belong in the room. Like, there's so many blocks. There's so many barriers that go unspoken that are keeping us from actually growing, like actually progressing, actually being a change. But it's also because we're confined by being employees. Like, maybe, in the break room, we might be able to have a discussion, feel like, we really want to be a part of a change and we're wishing things are different. But we can't because we're dependent on our benefits and a paycheck or something along those lines. So it was important for me to take this stance as my own, as my own organization, taking my own risks in leading in this way, while also encouraging others to not just come out and, be emotional and and irresponsible, but really allowing them to see that the process is so much easier than that they imagine, right? That these perceived barriers of opportunity they're illusions. They're not what we think. They're so much more accessible than what we imagine, right? And to not wait for a space to be right for us to show up. I have heard from others that because there is not a door out signs that says people of color not allowed, that therefore those spaces should be perceived as inclusive, and that there are so many more factors behind why people of color do not participate or get access to resources. But I'm now empowering people of color to recognize that these resources are available to them. They're at an arm's reach, and that if they're not being invited, they need to show up.
Right.
And I'm pointing out where they need to be.
I love the idea of taking real estate, like taking up space.
Build a table.
I love it.
Build it.
I'll say when it comes to, I love the idea of there's perceived barriers or perceived borders of opportunity. Like opportunities, there's so many relationships, conversations, showing up. Because that's the one thing I offered to do in grad school. One of my mentors, Dr. Jill Zamar, she said, man, if there's one thing that you do, if you want to be successful, you want to create shift, she's like, show up. So that's one thing I dedicated myself to, showing up. And there'd be so many instances where I got invited to speak on stage, or people were grateful that my energy was just there, and it encouraged them to do something because, the spaces can be catalysts, but then what happens outside of the spaces, what happens at home, what happens in, the impact that you're talking about. Like I see, you don't always get to see the domino effect as a leader, but you don't need to see the domino effect and how it's impacting others' lives, because it's then for them when they take the opportunity to show up, which is the really beautiful work. It's like the things that I don't see, like in people showing up differently in their health, impacts them differently. And that's so important. And my question for you is, what do you think, from what you've noticed, what does it really take for people to remove those barriers so that way then they take more action to show up?
It's mindset shift, right? Ultimately, we all need to quit it. Like, we need to stop the stories. We need to change the narrative. And we intoxicate ourselves amongst our own communities. Like, we have this tendency of believing everything that we hear. And oftentimes, like, it's, to me, what appears to be like the simplest thing, like literally like a Google search and a referral. But we're so caught up in assuming that that's not for us because we saw that was only attainable by somebody who had a certain level of education or came from a certain status in their family or is making a certain level of income or is in a certain type of family structure, or we make excuses of all types for why things are not accessible to us. But I think it's also a matter of like having a friend, right, that can invite you and introduce you and tell you that these things are okay, like that it's okay for you to try, that you do the soft introduction in an email that makes it just easier for the person to then dive in. It's being the support system, the bridge, as I said, it's the breakthrough. So sometimes when people are like, oh, I really want to help like diverse communities and things like that. Well, one, yeah, listen. Second, don't make it about yourself, right? Because that has happened a lot where I've been asked to share and then it bites me. Like, just listen and believe what it is. And, and then allow people, allow yourself to be a vessel to support people in breaking through that. Like, not taking it like personally, but being like, dang, like that made me feel all kinds of ways. I want to support you because I had no idea. And sorry that you feel that way. I recognize that I have access. So I recognize that I have access. So when I say that, I mean that it's about capital. It's about who you know and who you sit with, who you have conversations with, who's in your Rolodex or your, or your cell phone contact list. Like, we are who we know, ultimately. So if you want to help a person of color take the next step, give them access to your social capital. I think that social capital is greater than any currency. It will carry you further than any dollar. My company was built on social capital. It was built on trust, on relationships. Like, and again, it took me recognizing that by continuously being approached by other organizations who were showing interest and value in my network and my contacts. And I was like, oh wow, I'm sitting on something really special. I should do something about this. No matter where I go, people are always there with me. So yeah, so I'm about people.
I love all of that. I feel like I'm in a space of efforting to create space for myself to pay homage to all of my relationships from Connecticut, from Life University, from here in Tucson. I love being able to create spaces where we can all celebrate, we can all cry, we can all have fun, we can all journey, it's like one of my favorite things. I think you'll appreciate this, is like my people meeting my people. Like you meeting Dr. Michael Hallerback the other week and going to Nogales together, and Taryn coming down. Shout out to Taryn for Steph's Bangs, by the way. Like y'all being able to meet each other and laugh with each other. It's like two of the most respected people that I know and have been so important in similar capacities. Like he welcomed me to Life University and to Delta Sigma Chi, my fraternity. And, you really welcomed me to Tucson and Nogales and your culture and your world. So it's so sacred, and it's like, as you're speaking too, I love this analogy of the bridge, you being a bridge, but then it's like, once you're being the bridge for people to start to walk on, then it's like they become the bridge, and then it's like you become the suspensory system, being the support system. Like you're the legs that are coming out of the ocean, the depth of the ocean, or wherever body of water. You're giving them ground to speak on, so they can keep building their bridge because you've already existed. They can keep venturing more because you got them, and then you're just one, but they have their community, which is they're all individual vibranium levels, steel strong, like suspensory cables that then suspend the bridge, so that way it's active and it can stay moving and grooving. And even though the wind might come, it may move and shift in different things, but because there's such a strong bridge based off of the foundation of trust, of love, a consistency, and releasing and allowing into that, people can continue to build the bridge of their new expression however they want.
I take that so seriously. People are so passionate. And we learned during COVID, brother, that like under pressure, we become the most creative.
Ooh.
Give us a chance. Give us a chance.
Yes.
Like, you don't know how to support us? You don't know what to do with all your money? Give us a chance. Give us an opportunity to be able to have the answer, to be the solution for things that impact us every single day. And we will grow your economy. We will grow our economy. Like, we need a chance. But the chance isn't coming for us. I just got to remind us that. We got to create it.
Yeah.
We got to create these opportunities. And for sure, I'm a support system. For sure. But I'm also a facilitator in like dreams, dude. Like people trust me with the most sensitive stuff. Like, and it usually starts with ideas usually come from a place of like a lot of passion, but usually from wanting to resolve something really traumatic, something that came from a place of like being really impacted. My dad got diabetes and it impacted my family. So therefore I decided to start a nonprofit. Therefore my family took the reins to educate ourselves on what was possible. And now we're supporting others and recognizing, what food actually is and how it's impacting my family and your family. Like stories like that come, like, it's not just, not that a franchisee is not a great investment and a wonderful business opportunity. It's one also that Hispanic communities take on, but it's so much more about impact, right? It's so much more about wanting to be the change and to push up against the system. But again, we cannot count on completely on governments and universities to provide us the resources and that are needed in order to be the change, and we don't need their permission, which is something that I really struggled with for a really long time. I was waiting to be validated. Well, I'm undoubtable. I'm undeniable. Like, I'm doing the work that is needed, and I'm the right person to be doing the work, and I'm encouraging others just like me to also be empowered to do the work and to embrace the suck in doing the work, because we're pioneers. Like, I might be imploding right now with emotions, but because it's a big sense of responsibility, you know, like I'm overwhelmed with feelings of just feeling like, man, I really want this.
Yeah. You ain't imploding either, sis. That energy is moving through you with your big ass heart. Of course you. Oh, thank you. Tu corazón.
Gracias.
Sí, claro. And I love the idea of I love the idea, like, dreams can come from pain. Like, they can stem from pain. They can stem from this massive stimulus or impulse of, like, when you're growing up or wherever it may be, it's like you then get inspired to do something so that way others don't have to experience what you experienced. And at the same time, I love the concept of, you know, give us a chance. Like I was saying last year, I'm like, yo, invest in me. Like, man, if I had like a angel investor or something, I was like, yo, I will change this city so much fucking faster and help it heal so much quicker, help it experience more of its depth. Because it was like, you know, finding the footing, like just getting here to Tucson, which you didn't know, would you remind me? But it's like, you know, it's like someone gives me a chance. Like, I know that I can just like crush it. And that's where Brett came in, he gave me a chance to be able to just come into his space and, you know, taught me the systems, taught me the way of the source. Like, it's been teaching me how to adjust the last several years, but I've watched him and how he moves. And it's like, but it comes with showing up. Because in showing up, you give yourself an invitation to actually shift things. And showing up, you create the space for you to be able to let your application of your expression, of your thoughts, of your creativity to flourish and come out. But you got to give yourself a chance before others give you a chance.
Absolutely.
And I think some people, they just have like they have to overcome that threshold that you've spoken on too. They got to overcome that threshold to give them to then take action, because the threshold is the border of their current level of experience and current level of the world, current level of their perspective. But when they can break down that perspective, they can break down that border, they can run through it, they can take it down, whatever it may be. Then on the other side is newness, is expression, is connection, is love, is freedom.
There's innovation without borders. Right? Without physical borders.
So I hear.
Mental borders.
So I hear.
Right? When you reach that space, to be free, to feel safe, to have community, to be surrounded by others that are like you, that have similar lived experiences, that, you know, that are connected to similar family backgrounds, that truly make you feel like a borderlander. Like, it's okay to be create. You don't have to show up with your AirPods and your screen print t-shirt and you know, and know the newest of this or that in Palo Alto to fit in. Like, this is your space. This is your community. You are already enough. And you are needed.
What you're hitting, Lou and I forget what episode it was, but we talk about, it's like you have everything that you need at this current level to be able to incur success or to progress. Kind of like Super Mario Brothers. When you're going through the level, you got everything you need. You just got to be able to give yourself permission to explore all the tubes and to discover and to, once more, just lower that threshold of inaction so that we can take action. It's like, and it's mental, which is why I love innovation without borders. Because that shit is what is needed for the world, physically, mentally, relationship-wise, financially. Like, people need it when they embody innovation without borders, they'll be able to realize they can bring about change in their lives and then everyone else that's supposed to impact them, because we're all interconnected.
For sure. And there's a sense of urgency. You know, the world is changing. We got to wake up.
Yeah, then the concept comes, or I like the sacred sense of urgency, because then, you know, how is it changing? Is it moving destructively or is it moving constructively? Because there's always like this space in between or somewhere in the middle. And I imagine the more people that effort to move into a state of freedom, of liberation, of innovation without borders, that it's going to move towards a more constructive space, because the powers that be, or the this or that, the way that it's always been, has proved that it is moving deconstructively if we don't do something about it.
For sure. So we like to say that, we see challenges as opportunities, because the narrative in border spaces is one of real challenges, and our future will hold serious challenges, but we celebrate solution making. There is enough in what we have to offer. There is, and it's just a matter of like tools. There's a lot of also opportunity for others to learn from the process and from those who are coming into this innovation culture. We should respect, reverse innovation, like how things are already being done in spaces where there hasn't been access to some of the resources that, that we're looking to provide in some of these communities, to examine how things are already being done. Again, to like never lose sight of remaining curious, and to like not show up in spaces feeling like you have the answer. Even myself, I got to check myself. I'm from the border, but I have to regularly remind myself that I don't have all the answers, and that I am there because I have far more to learn than I have to offer.
The spirit of curiosity. Oh. I think if more people will embody that spirit of curiosity, of humility, and it's like the number one border that prevents us from progressing is thinking that we know it all, or thinking that we somehow like we don't need to like keep learning or keep growing, that somehow we've assimilated enough information that fool us into thinking that we know everything, or we know more than the people around us. And I just love the re-invitation to, keep being curious. As I think bare minimum, one thing that y'all can do who are listening is how can you remove any barriers within yourself that you've placed that have allowed for less curiosity about yourself in all the ways, all the domains of life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, relationship-wise, vocation, professionally. Like, man, if there's any of those barriers, may you take this as an opportunity or a journal prompt to just be able to remove that about yourself and discover, who put those barriers there in the first place, or what put those barriers there in the first place. And can you remove them? And what is life without those barriers, and you moving and feeling unencumbered, and all that you're supposed to feel and all that you're supposed to bring about in the world, as there's codes and all of the emotion, there's codes and the challenges, like Stephanie says, and there's so much space for opportunity, because the opportunity is an adaptation from what was.
Good stuff, brother.
Igual a ti, hermana. Man, I definitely feel super full, complete. But, I got to ask, is there anything else that you'd like to impart to our people that you may have not already?
Yeah, I guess for those of us that aren't from, from this region, like, and spinning out of this conversation of being curious, is that there's a lot more to Tucson and the border region that you've afforded yourself to discover. So get out there, and be prepared to ask more questions, and not be afraid to be wrong, to seek to understand, and tap into the history of this place. And I think a lot of things will make more sense. And don't shy away from the experiences that other people are also having, in spaces that we share. Like, there are real challenges. And even though you might be having one experience here, that doesn't mean that it's everybody else's experience. So, just tread softly. And, and just like me, like, just kind of remind yourself that we are constantly treading upon like people's dreams. And especially when a person from a marginalized group, or from a community that you're unfamiliar with, comes to you with like advice or support, Remember that you can, and you encourage you that you should support that person by affording them access and adding just like one more brick to this like overall breakthrough that is needed to see real change in places that are needed most.
Oh. Final question for you, sis. How would you describe your flavor of soul coffee, or your flavor of your soul, to the world?
Just like I like my coffee, black, no sweet, no cream.
Good for the soul.
You gotta taste the cafe.
I agree. Oh, it's so good, y'all. Stephanie, how can people reach out to you?
Startupunidos.com for storytelling, startupunidos.blog. I am an open book. Reach out to me. You can email me, sb@startupunidos.com. I'm always up to something, and I can be found all across the region. I visit Phoenix regularly, but you can mostly find me these days in Tucson and about half my time in Nogales. So hit me up.
Oh, man. Y'all do yourself a favor. Hit up sis. Give some love, and, be able to appreciate the love bridge that she's really cultivated here in Tucson, Nogales, and South Arizona region. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Soul Coffee, y'all. And for all my people that may be listening, we got some events for you to celebrate the end of this year. This episode should be dropping on a Monday, which means Thursday, I'm going to have a mastering meditation class at Arizona Sands Club. Please feel free to shoot them or myself a DM on Instagram. That's this Saturday. I'm doing an event here called Providing for the Provider, which it feels good to do it again, y'all, but that's going to be at the L offices north. Please shoot me a DM so I can send you the link to register via Calendly. I want to cap things at 60 people. We're already, at this time we're recording, we're at 25% occupancy, which feels freaking amazing. And then last but not least, we got the Source Santa. So we got Source Santa Sunday, December 18th, which is going to go on, I believe, 11 to 2 p.m. at the Source Chiropractic. Come on in, take a picture with Santa. Santa's black, by the way. Did you know? All right, well, maybe now you know. Bring a gift, as we're also raising a toy drive, or building for a toy drive with the Lapin Foundation, as we want to get some kids, some good energy and some good gifts for Christmas, y'all. But more to come. Y'all loved, y'all appreciate it. Until next time, peace.